All right, so last class we finished up by talking about Solomon Asch's study of conformity using line length, where they had the person say, had the group of people say which line was the same as the standard line, okay, and to see who would actually say the wrong ones. Found conformed 30% of the time, and then some of the factors that go into that, conformity, all right, if the group is unanimous, okay, if it's larger, right, if you admire the group status, all of this stuff that we were talking about last class is going to come back up later on today, especially when we talk about groupthink. Now, there are a lot of factors that go into conformity, all right? So in the different types of conformity, there's social contagions, okay, there are social norms, and then there's what is called social influence. Social influence there are two different types of social influence. Social influence is just any time that our behavior is guided by the society, the environment around us. There's what is called normative and informational social influence. Normative social influence is basically it's the same as following social norms. We act in certain ways to gain approval or to avoid disapproval. Essentially, a lot of times we go along with the group to fit in. We do whatever is normal for the group to do. Okay? You can see this in every aspect of life. All of us conform and all of us want to fit in. Okay, but I have a picture here. I think it's always really interesting seeing like groups of people together and seeing what they're wearing. Like here is like this is like the basic white girl uniform. Where and I don't know if they all and it's funny like seeing people like I will see this a lot with people dressed like this. I don't know, is it planned? Does everybody say, hey, we're wearing the white shirts and the white shoes today? Or is it just like-minded people? Like-minded people, okay? All right. That is an example of normative social influence, okay? Doing something to fit into the group. Tattoos have become very normative, okay? It's actually like almost rare for somebody to not have a tattoo now. I think I've said this some class, but like I am one of the few people that I know that doesn't have a tattoo. Okay, the majority of my friends all have tattoos. I just don't have any. So normative social influence, just following the group to fit in, doing what is normal. So here's a quick video. This is from Candid Camera. All right, it's called the Conformity Elevator.
The gentleman in the elevator now is a candid star. These folks who are entering, the man with the white shirt, the lady with the trench coat, and subsequently one other member of our staff will face the rear. And you'll see how this man in the trench coat tries to maintain his individuality. But little by little, he looks at his watch, but he's really making an excuse for turning just a little bit more to the wall. Now we'll try it once again. Here's the candid subject. Here comes the Candid Camera staff, 3 of them at least. And this man has apparently been in groups. with his hat on in the elevator. First he makes a full turn to the rear, and Charlie closes the door. A moment later, we'll open the door. Everybody's changed positions. Now we'll see if we can use group pressure for some good. Now, in a moment, on Charlie's signal, everybody turns forward. Notice they take off their hats. And now, do you think we could reverse the procedure? Watch.
All right, so there you go. That's normative social influence. The other type of social influence is what is called informational social influence. Normative social influence would fall into the category of like top-down processing, just kind of going based off of your expectations. Informational social influence is more like bottom-up processing. Informational social influence is this idea that, especially in situations that we are unsure of, in environments that maybe we don't know, okay, in new situations or whatnot, we are willing to accept what other people believe to be correct if we are unsure of ourselves. Okay? Essentially, because we have an intense need to be correct, because being correct makes us fit in, right? Basically, a lot of times, we will go along with the group because the group knows better. So an example of informational social influence is, and they do these studies a lot, it's interesting. Humans love lines, like especially Americans. We see a line, we're like, shit, I gotta get in that line right now. Okay, and they've done these experiments where they will just have, like at the mall or whatnot, they will just have a line that is leading nowhere. But what they have found is that even if people walking by it, right, even though they don't know what the line is for, they will get into the line. Because they look and say, I guess these people know something that I don't know. I better follow their lead here. And so they will just get into a line that does not actually do anything because they're basing their opinion of reality on what other people think. Is there anyone in here that, like, before you watch a movie or a TV show, you always read reviews about it? Your mom does? Okay. Right. I won't really watch a movie unless it has good reviews. Okay, or if I've heard good things. And a lot of times it's based on what somebody that I don't even know who it is saying. Like going on Metacritic and reading reviews. All right, but say, all right, well, this movie is reviewed really well. Okay, well, everybody seems to agree on that, so I guess it must be correct. All right, that is informational social influence. So, here's another quick little video. The Mortal Kombat movie, which you were playing, but it has 55 on Rotten Tomatoes and less than my effort to. Yes, okay, that Mortal Kombat movie is, the reviews of it are horrible right now. Okay, which means I'm not gonna watch it. Did anybody see Nomadland? Movie that just won Best Picture? No? I didn't either. I saw Judas and the Black Messiah, Trial of Chicago 7, and Promising Young Woman, but not that one. All right, so here in this, okay, it's a shoe store and there's a sign that says you can only step on the black squares. Nobody questions it, okay, but they just go along with it.
This is a shoe store, the Roberts Shoe Repairs. And you see how willing executives... This is an amazing piece of film, really. It's called Adult Hopscotch. I don't know if they thought that the white would come off on their shoes or what.
No, I think women are in sympathy because they've scrubbed so many floors.
Is that it?
I think.
No one all day asked why. That's against the law, I think.
They didn't?
No, sir. But here's a fellow who tries to do it just for a step or two. He tries to be a young man. I look at this guy.
All right, so there you go. Okay, informational social influence. They're looking around and saying, well, everybody else is doing this, so I guess I need to as well. All right, are there any questions there about social influence? All right, so is conformity okay? Yes and no. Sometimes when we conform, we do things that we wouldn't normally do to fit in. Okay, it's like like your parents are like, well, if your friends jumped off a bridge, would you? The answer is probably yes, you would, as long as you would fit in by doing it. But they have found that conformity can lead to, it can lead to less antisocial behaviors, and B, it can lead to, like, if you're in a group of people that is donating money, right, and the majority of people donate a large amount of money, that makes more of the group donate higher amounts of money to conform to the group standard. Okay, it's basically just whatever the group standard is what we are, and so if there are high standards for something, most people are going to conform. They also see a difference in level of conformity in different countries. Eastern countries that are more collectivistic, such as Japan, China, Korea, those countries have higher levels of conformity because that is the expectation. Okay? Those countries don't value people sticking out from the norm. Okay? Their value is everybody is just kind of in this one mass moving together at all times. Okay? And so they have a high, in Western culture though, all right, Western cultures are individualistic. We very much value, okay, being unique. Right? And so conformity, Westerners are less likely to conform, whether that's good or bad, but you've seen it a lot this past year with the mask wearing. Okay, where people are just not willing, people in East Asia have been wearing masks for years. Okay? And it's just kind of the norm that if you're sick over there, you wear a mask. Here, you can't even get people to wear a mask during a deadly pandemic because they're not going to conform. They're not sheep. Okay? So conformity is valued more in Eastern cultures than it is in Western cultures. All right, any questions about that? All right, obedience. We all know what obedience is. Tendency to comply with someone that we perceive as being an authority figure. There are big cultural differences in obedience as well. In Eastern cultures, it is expected a lot of the time, and not just Eastern cultures, okay, but it is expected that if somebody older than you tells you to do something, you do it because that person is older than you, or in more important. Whereas in Western cultures, it is more likely that people will question authority figures. So, famous experiment you need to know for obedience. One of the big three, the second one that was done, the first one's ask, second one is this one, third one's prison experiment. Stanley Milgram's study of obedience. And I think didn't we watch the video on this in the beginning of the year? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So, in this experiment, if you remember, all right, they've done it. They got over 1,000 people to do it. They've recreated it over and over and over again, and they get the same results every time. But they had somebody who the participant was supposed to be, by being told by an authority figure, a guy in a white coat, that they needed to shock this person that was the learner. All right, they found that 66% of the teachers were willing to go to the highest level of shock, which is 450 volts. Okay, simply because there was somebody perceived as an authority figure there, a man in a white coat, telling them that that is what they needed to do. So we're going to watch the video. We've already watched it before, but I'll show it again in case you've forgotten about it.
A decade earlier, psychologist Stanley Milgram had also looked at how we respond to authority. In order to understand how people were induced to obey unjust regimes and participate in atrocities such as the Holocaust, he set up an experiment. Volunteers were told they were taking part in scientific research to improve memory.
You open those and tell me which of you is which, please. Teacher. Where?
Separated by a screen, the teacher would ask the learner questions in a word game and administer an electric shock when the answer was incorrect. He was told to increase the voltage with each wrong answer.
Cloud. Horse. Rock. House. Answer. Wrong. 150 volts. Answer. Horse.
Experiment run, that's all. Get me out of here. Get me out of here, please.
Continue, please. Go right ahead.
I refuse to go on. Let me out.
Refuses to go on. The experiment requires you continue, teacher. Please continue.
Participants didn't know that the learner was really an actor and the so-called shocks harmless.
You're going to get a shock. 180 volts.
I can't stand the pain. Let me out of here.
Can't stand it. I'm not going to kill that man. I mean, who's going to take the responsibility if anything happens to that gentleman? I'm responsible for anything that happens here. Continue, please. All right, next one. Slow. Walk, dance, truck, music. And
2/3 of volunteers were prepared to administer a potentially fatal electric shock when encouraged to do so by what they perceived as a legitimate authority figure. In this case, a man in a white coat.
375 volts. I think something's happened to that fellow in there. I don't get no answer. He was hollering for less voltage. Can't you check in and see if he's all right, please?
Milgram's findings horrified America. They showed that decent American citizens were as capable of committing acts against their conscience as the Germans had been under the Nazis.
Example. All right, so with Milgram, all right, ordinary people can do shocking things. So some of the interesting, if you're interested in this, there is a movie called Experimenter with Peter Sarsgaard. It's pretty good. All right, but some of the interesting things that they have found. So they redid this study most recently in 2009. They got the exact same results. 66% still willing to go to 450 volts if they are told to by an authority figure. Some of the factors that went into this, though, they found that if the teacher could see the learner, okay, so in that one they were on the other side of the wall, so they couldn't see them. If the teacher could see the learner, the shock rate went down considerably. If the authority figure was dressed like a normal person and not in a white lab coat, obedience went down considerably. If the authority figure was standing on the other side of the room, telling them that they needed to go on with the experiment, obedience went down considerably. It's just the proximity of the person. And then, I think most interestingly, so the initial study was held at Yale. All right, Yale, obviously one of the best universities in the country. And Yale is in the town of New Haven, Connecticut. And what they found, and Yale is a very prestigious university, but New Haven is, I think, kind of a shithole. Like, I don't think New Haven is very nice. And I think it's kind of like a blue collar. And a lot of the people who took part in this experiment were like blue collar workers, meaning where they worked like industrial jobs, like things like that. What was interesting was they would get, they got participants from New Haven, but they would hold trials at Yale, at the university, and also just in the town of New Haven. And they found that when they held the trials in the town of New Haven, obedience went down considerably compared to when they held it at Yale. Now, does anybody have a guess as to why that would be? Why might obedience go down if it's at New Haven, if it's in the town of New Haven rather than on Yale's campus? Okay, all right, they felt more pressure on campus. All right, greater authority at Yale. Yeah, okay. There at Yale, Yale's one of the most prestigious universities. It gave the experiment more credibility. These people, and especially the ones that were maybe poor, blue collar, are like, wow, this is like at Yale University, like this is really important. I need to go along with it. I need to obey. In New Haven, they're like, well, this is just in New Haven. There's a McDonald's next door. Okay, and so it kind of took away the credibility a little bit, which made it less likely that people would obey. A lot of ethical concerns with Milgram. It says on here that it would not receive approval. It actually does. It receives approval still, but they changed some stuff. Most notably, one of the biggest issues with one of the biggest ethical issues was because Milgram did not want it getting out into New Haven's relatively small, I think, and he didn't want it getting out into New Haven that the person was not getting shot. They did not debrief the participants until like 3 months afterwards. And so the participants left the experiment not knowing what happened to the person they were shocking and if they had killed the person or whatnot. So it did cause some psychological trauma. So now when they do it, they debrief. All right, are there any questions about that? All right. Now we're going to move on to the next one. We're going to talk about group dynamics. And why does being in a group make us make bad decisions? We always think the group's right. It's not. All right, so there's the join code. All right, so group influence on behavior. We're going to go over 5 different terms right now, all of which are very important, all of which have a good, or not all, but good chance of showing up on an FRQ, and I certainly is a multiple choice question, and I know that at least 2 of them have shown up on the exam that I'm giving you so far already. All right, and all of that, whoa, God, all of them really, I'm going to give you the term, and I'm going to give you an example of it. For some of them, we have collaboration boards for you to come up with your own. But these should all be relatively straightforward, and you should be able to come up with examples of them relatively easily, because we've all fallen victim to all of them. Okay? And they all kind of work together. So if we had, like, a lot of times we have a tendency to be like, oh, is it this thing or is it this thing? And we think that all these terms exist like in a vacuum on their own, and like if one's happening, then the other one can't be happening. Right? These are all reciprocal to one another. All right, they all just kind of build on one another. All right, so how does being in a group, or how does having observers change our performance on things? Social facilitation is the idea that things that we are good at or things that are easy, we perform better when we are being watched. Okay? That being in a social situation and with something that we are good at, that actually facilitates our performance. Experienced teachers probably teach the best when they're in front of a large group of students. Last year, okay, when I took over Mavity's classes when he left, right, I was like on point every day because we were like 70 some kids in the class. Anybody who plays sports probably knows somebody that is like, in practice they're like okay, but then in games they just like ball out when everybody's watching. Okay? That's social facilitation. You know, the best players play the best. Michael Jordan played the best in the biggest moments when everybody was watching. On the other hand, if something is new to us, or it is hard and we are being watched, we generally perform worse. Do math teachers still make you all like come up to the board in front of like the whole class and like solve a problem? No, I didn't think so. That was like a big thing like when I was in school, that like you could just be randomly called on to come up to the front of the class to solve a problem. And like I suck at math. Like I suck at it. Freudian slip. I suck at it if I'm by myself. If I have everybody watching me and I'm trying to do it, I'm going to suck at it even more. Okay? So things that are new to us or things that are hard, we perform worse when there is a group around us. New teachers would probably get very frazzled teaching in front of a group of like 70 people. Now, is there anything we can think of that we could tie this back to? The idea that our performance is related to our stress level. Anybody remember what that's called? Yep, it's optimal arousal theory. And then do you remember the inverted U graph? We actually had another one that said like well-learned tasks, we perform better with higher levels of arousal, and poorly learned tasks, we perform better with lower levels of arousal. All right, you can't remember what it's called. That is Yerkes-Dodson. All right, so now, who in here does not like group projects? Who in here? All right. Convi, don't. Okay, Emily, don't like. Anybody else not like group projects? Who in here really likes group projects? All right. Anybody else really like group projects? Those of you that don't like group projects, why do you not like group projects most of the time? Come on, guys. Faster we answer questions, faster I get you out of here.
Sometimes like visuals that like that one person always doing all the work.
Okay. All right.
Some people like clash in the group.
Okay, all right. You don't get along. All right. If I don't like something, it's tough for me to say to the person I don't like it. Okay. All right. Usually, I always hated group projects because I was always the one who ended up having to do most of it. Okay. Now, a lot of people who really like group projects probably like it for that very reason, that they can get away with not doing a whole lot. Right? This is what is called social loafing. Social loafing is the idea that when we are in a group, when we are part of a group that's doing something, we tend to put forth less effort than if we were doing it on our own. You loaf when you're in a group. Especially when you are, that should say not, especially if you're not being held individually accountable. That's why in group projects, having one overall grade is fine, but you need to have separate grades as well. Okay? Because if everybody's just getting the same grade, then that just gives one or two people, they're like, well, I'll still get an A, so who cares? Okay? So you need to have individual accountability. We see this in sports a lot of the time. If you have a team that has like one or two superstars on it, and then maybe some other just good players, right? What do the good players a lot of times end up doing? The ones that aren't superstars but are good enough. Slack off, yeah. Like when I've had teams that have Emily Barnes or a long time ago Annalise Hayward, a lot of times everybody else will just kind of stand back and be like, well, we'll let Emily do it all. Okay? You sort of sort of, you can, as long as there is not individual accountability. All right, so anybody got any questions about social loafing? All right, now, 3 terms that are very, very important. And those two, social facilitation and social loafing, kind of go in with these. All right? They're all kind of just in the same category of group behavior. But what they have found is that being in a group, being part of a group, makes us feel anonymous. And because of that feeling of anonymity, we lose our sense of self. Meaning, when we feel anonymous in a group, we lose maybe our moral guidelines or whatnot that we would have if we were on our own. And by being in a group, it can then lead to us behaving in ways that we wouldn't normally if we were on our own. Because we sort of lose our sense of personal responsibility. And we lose our sense of self-restraint. Have any of the girls in here ever been heckled by a group of guys? Like a group of guys saying inappropriate things to you? McKenna, you say you have? Yeah. Okay, anybody else? Yeah. All right, I think it's probably pretty common, unfortunately, because when guys all get in the group, especially teenage guys, they're complete assholes. Okay. All right, but chances are most of the individual guys in that group, if it was just one person looking at McKenna, he's probably not gonna, start hollering at her. All right. But when it's a big group of them and they feel like they're not being singled out by doing it, then they're more likely to act in those ways that they wouldn't normally act. This is de-individuation. If we look at, we can explain things like rioting behavior from this. Okay, the riot in the Capitol. Most of those people are probably not going to storm the Capitol themselves. But as the group is going there and they get swept up in the group, they feel like they are anonymous. They feel like nobody's going to notice them do it. And then groups become more extreme as like-minded groups become more extreme, and we'll talk about that here in a sec. All right, so a lot of those people lost the sense of individualism. And a lot of them, after the fact, when all of a sudden they got arrested, they were like, what? Yeah, no, you weren't actually anonymous. There were a lot of pictures of you on the internet. Sorry, just because you were wearing a big headdress, dressed like a buffalo, doesn't make it so people can't recognize you. There are other factors that can go into this. Wearing certain outfits. In the Stanford prison experiment, there's an aspect of de-individuation. Anybody know what they did to de-individualize the guards? They gave them sunglasses. We put on, just simply the act of wearing sunglasses, makes us feel more anonymous. Okay, uniforms makes you feel more anonymous because you're just all one thing. It could help explain police violence and why they may act in certain ways when they have a uniform on versus not having one on. Something as simple as having Greek letters on your shirt can de-individualize. Who in here has ever looked at a YouTube comment section? Is it nice? No. Okay? It is any online behavior is entirely de-individuation. YouTube comment sections, Twitter, Facebook. Okay, even when you're not anonymous, people will say things online that they would not even think of. Like a great example of this is, let's say you have a college basketball player and let's say they miss a free throw at the end of a game and they lose the game. If you go and look at their Twitter mentions afterwards, it is going to be some of the meanest shit that you have ever seen. Okay, and it'll be like a 55-year-old guy whose like profile picture is like him and all of his kids, and in his profile it says like, father, blah blah blah, follower of Jesus, all these things, and he's like, F you for missing the free throw. Like, okay, that is the individuation. All right. Anybody got any questions about that? Oh, there's a really good example from a book that you all read. Anybody know which book? Lord of the Flies. Okay. All right. Yeah, Lord of the Flies. The scene. Anybody know what scene is the individuation? Yeah. Okay. When they're dancing around the fire. They have the face paint on. Face paint. That's why people in costumes act differently. Like why people in like the Ku Klux Klan wear the hoods. All right. But they have the face paint on. They're dancing around the fire. They're all in like a rouse. All right. It's chanting "Kill the beast, kill the beast." And then they see Simon, and then they kill Simon. All right. So here's a quick example. This is from like Oregon State or something like that, but it's a good example of the individuation, and then how as soon as somebody is singled out from the group, that sense of anonymity kind of goes away. All right, so you can see as soon as people start getting singled out, the behavior kind of changes, and somebody goes from being I'm muted. You can see as soon as somebody's singled out, the behavior kind of changes, and then somebody comes to try to smooth everything over because that group dynamic is gone. That bubble's been popped. All right, so real quick, guys, go ahead and I have a collaboration board here somewhere. Okay, go ahead and see if you can come up with your own example of de-individuation. shouldn't really be all that hard because we've all kind of I guess I made it so I didn't have to approve it. Well, please nobody say anything appropriate. Going to Target with friends versus you will act differently. You won't go crazy at Target. Oh, okay, yeah. Destroying stores and lighting them on fire during riots. Yep. All right. Okay, yeah, the Black Lives Matter protests were any protests, any riots, all right, that come out of that is de-individuation. Most people are not just going to be like, I'm going to go riot, and like they're like, it's like one person running around like smashing windows with a bat. That's just somebody who's crazy. Okay. Eating something disgusting as a dare. I guess so. People at the college sports games paint body with the yeah, sports, okay? That the de-individuation in sports leads people to, people who like talk shit to like players and whatnot, like that's de-individuation. All right, in 5th grade, the auditorium began chanting, "We want food," okay? All right, going to a party and doing crazy things you wouldn't normally do, like drugs and alcohol, doing something you wouldn't do because of peer pressure, all right, staff members making fun of a customer when they work together versus what, okay, all right. When you see a group of people destroying a teacher's car and you decide to join in, okay, all right. Friend invites you and says other friends are coming. No, that's not de-individuation. That's just... De-individuation is when our behavior changes due to the fact that we are in a group because we feel more anonymous. Okay, all right. So looks like most of y'all got that. De-individual. We are no longer an individual when we are in a group. Okay, people at a concert jumping up and down. Yep. When Virginia lost to UMBC, and everyone was pressed about it. Well, just again, acting differently in a group than we would on our own. All right, so de-individuation can lead to another type of group dynamic, what is called group polarization. Has anybody in here ever been, I'll just use teachers for example. Let's say that you're like sitting at the lunch table, the normal year, sitting at the lunch table with a group of friends, or you're on a group chat with a group of friends. I know this happens a lot with I'm in a group chat with Grauer and Engel, and then another one with Federico and Green, and I know this exact same thing happens with us. You're sitting in a group chat, sitting at a table, and all of you all have a teacher. And maybe you don't love the teacher, but you're just like, yeah, they're just kind of annoying. But then you're sitting there talking about them, and it starts off relatively calm. But then by the end of the conversation, you're ready to go burn down the teacher's house. Everybody's all worked up, like, yeah, I can't believe we should get them fired, blah, blah, blah. Has anybody ever had that before? Or it could be with anything. It could be with a friend, in friend groups, a lot of times there's one friend that just kind of annoys everybody, but they just let them still hang out. Or it could be about a movie or whatnot. You're talking about a movie that you thought was good, and you're talking about it with your friends, and then by the end of the conversation, it's the greatest movie you've ever seen. Okay? This happens all the time. This is called group polarization. Group polarization is our tendency. Polarizing is going to the extremes. Group polarization is our tendency to, when we are in a like-minded group, as the group, the individual opinions about something are generally going to be more moderate than the group opinion about something. When like-minded individuals get together in a group and discuss something, the group becomes more extreme. And group decisions tend to be more extreme than individual decisions. It's called and when this is bad, it's called a risky shift. Okay, so you can see here with like high prejudice groups, like the Ku Klux Klan, right? Individually, they may be here, and then as they get together as a group, they become more racist. But low prejudice groups, like, say, like the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, all right? Here they might be here, but then after they discuss a topic, all right, they tend to become less prejudiced. All right, they go in the opposite direction. We do this a lot of the time because we want to be like, if everybody agrees on something, we want to be the one that agrees the most with it. We want to be the most gung-ho on something because that helps us fit in. And so a lot of times our opinions will just get more extreme as the group gets more extreme so that we can continue to fit in. Let's see. So, an example of this is QAnon. Okay, and really any sort of like if you spend any time on like online forums, you can see as a topic is coming up, it just gets more and more extreme. But like QAnon started off just as this little thing, and now it is. And think about the people who believed in QAnon stormed the freaking Capitol of the United States, okay, to try to overthrow the U.S. government. 3 years ago, they were posting little racist memes with a frog, okay? And now they're trying to overthrow the U.S. government. That is group polarization. So, all right. Go ahead and see if you can come up with your own example of group polarization. All right. Yeah. Generally, you're right. When you only watch one news source, you become more extreme. But this is more so when you're in a group. Groups become more extreme than individuals are. Hence the name group polarization. Terrorist groups probably don't start off as extreme, but exactly. I actually have that written down. All right. Yep. Terrorists don't become terrorists overnight. Okay. Terrorist groups build up. All right, they're like-minded, they get together, and then they slowly, All right, groups that believe in a certain conspiracy theory, yeah. All right, flat earthers are more intense about it when they go to the Flat Earth Conference, which is a real thing. Okay. Group polarization can be dangerous because it can lead to people acting in violent ways. Friend group seeing a guy they don't like in public and then start talking about they don't like it finally. Okay, yeah. All right. Okay. All right, so if anybody else is typing one, because we got to move on to the last one. Thinking a test was a bit hard, then having a conversation with friends who all believe in the test should not have been graded. Yes, good one. Group of people at a sports game start by just talking about how they hate their and go, yep. When you're with your friends and you all agree that Taylor Swift is bad, you end up hating it even more after the conversation. That's a correct example. It's a bad opinion, but it is a that is an example. Although just it's a bad opinion. All right. So last thing for today, groupthink. Groupthink, very, very common. Who in here has ever been in a group of friends? Somebody suggests that something that you should do, and you know in your mind this is a dumb idea. And you're looking around to everybody, and you're thinking in your mind, all right, I know this is a dumb idea. Okay, everybody else must think this is a dumb idea. And you're looking around at everybody, and nobody's saying anything. So you believe, well, I guess everybody else thinks it's a good idea, so I'm not going to speak up because I don't want to be the one that rocks the boat. That happened with anybody before? Okay. If it hasn't, it will. Groupthink is this idea that just because we are in a group does not mean that the group, there is this assumption that groups make better decisions than individuals. That is 100% incorrect. Because a lot of times what happens in a group is that if there seems to be a consensus, we could call this, maybe, we could call this dealing with false consensus. When there seems to be a consensus, then that can get in the way of somebody trying to think about realistic alternative solutions to something. Okay? And in being in a group and making group decisions can inhibit creativity. Because we don't want to rock the boat because of normative social influence. We're afraid that if we rock the boat, that the group won't accept us anymore. This is most common when there is high cohesion in a group, meaning maybe friends, okay? When there seems to be unanimity, right? When de-individuation, it plays a role in it. But what they think, essentially with groupthink, is when like everybody in the group becomes like a yes man. What they consider groupthink to have a role in a lot of major catastrophes. The most famous example is the Challenger explosion. Right? They knew that they should not launch the Challenger on that day. It was too cold out. There was ice on the wings. But they were getting pressure from, not Northrop Grumman, the company that made the shuttle, to launch. And so when it came down to, are we going to launch or not, nobody wanted to dissent and say that they shouldn't. And there was a strong personality saying we need to do this, and nobody dissented. And even though most of them knew they shouldn't do it, nobody spoke up. Right? They launched, and the Challenger obviously exploded. The Bay of Pigs fiasco, where we tried to invade Cuba, where John F. Kennedy trained a bunch of Cubans with the CIA. Everybody kind of knew it was a bad idea. Okay? But nobody wanted to speak up and say, hey, should we really be doing this? It was something that Eisenhower put in, and then Kennedy got it. And it was really an embarrassment because it was a big-time failure. And then more recently, the 2016 election is an example of groupthink. Nobody even considered the possibility that Donald Trump was going to win the election. Nobody even looked at and say like, well, what other options? People are like, he's not going to win. Okay? Right? And nobody wanted to speak up and say, hey, I don't know. Okay? Maybe we should be looking at this a little bit differently. Maybe Hillary should spend more time in Michigan and Wisconsin. Nobody looked at it like that because nobody wanted to speak up, right? And then, obviously, Trump won. Okay? So, it's always good to have somebody to play devil's advocate in a group. It's always good to have the person that is willing to speak up and say, hey, is this good? All right. So, real quick, all right, go ahead and on the collaboration board, so you can come up with your own example of groupthink. All right, hazing is a great example of groupthink. And I can tell you that from personal experience, right? Generally, when there is hazing going on, you get group polarization. Hazing is an example. There's de-individuation. It's usually a larger group of people doing it. You get group polarization. The hazing group becomes slowly more and more extreme in it. And then you get groupthink. You get to the point in it where somebody knows that we should stop this, but nobody wants to be the one to burst the bubble of harmony. And so that is how these things escalate, and that is how people end up getting killed in hazing incidents. All right, so are we only going to have one example from Emily? Working in a group and someone has an idea, you don't want to say how stupid it is. Okay, yeah, that is a good one. When somebody's like, hey, I got it, and everybody's like, okay, yeah, nobody wants to be. Running across a busy street instead of walking to the crosswalk to the left because older people had said it was too far, so everyone else went along with it. Okay, all right, that sounds like a personal experience. Okay, the flag smashers not liking Carly's new attitude, but not standing up to her in Falcon in the winter. So what? I don't understand. Maybe somebody else understands what all that means. I think Winter Soldier, is that a Marvel thing? Okay.
Good afternoon.
All right, yep.
Students, may I
Bullying.
please for the afternoon announcement.
Okay, guys. All right. So next class, we'll be together for 30 minutes. We'll finish up a couple things real quick. Make sure you're studying for the test. And yeah, make sure you're studying for the test. And I will see you all on Wednesday.
Junior and senior drivers and hold
Goodbye.
everyone else for a few minutes till we call.